The Jove and Europa story overlaps into book 3, of course. Clean distinctions, beginnings and endings, aren't necessarily what Ovid prefers. So it goes there, and from there you get a sense of the repercussions that come. You get some narratives that give you an idea of what happens when an action brings about a reaction. And in this action, you get the father of Europa commanding his son to go find Europa. They don't know they don't know where she is, and she ran off with Jove, and they are understandably a little concerned. Cadmus goes and searches, can't find anything. He's afraid to return home, and so he goes to the oracle at Delphi and asks Apollo for some guidance. And the oracle tells him, "You will, travel until you find a heifer that has never known the yoke, and then this is going to be your new home." And he does, and he goes and he finds this, and in exploring his new home, he comes across this giant serpent, a huge snake, it seems, and he fights it, and it is a deathly battle, and because the snake has eaten all of Cadmus's companions, or killed them at least, and he is swearing revenge, and so he goes and he kills the serpent and sprays the blood of the serpent over the land, over the grass. And from this grows this race of people from the grass itself, from the land itself. You start to see the land transforming into people. Warriors start to emerge. The first things that pop up are the spears that they are holding, and then as they are emerging from the earth, they immediately start to hack at one another and start to fight. And Cadmus goes and says, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And they say, "No, no, no, this is our civil war. Don't interfere." And they go and they continue to slaughter one another. And it's a rather horrifying prophecy of what is to come. But the Cadmus's problems, let's say, don't really end there. The war settles down. They do. Cadmus has children and grandchildren, and the around him, of course, is building the city of Thebes. One of Cadmus's offspring is Actaeon. Actaeon is a hunter, and we get this lovely little story of Actaeon and Diana. Actaeon goes out hunting with his companions and his dogs, and he finds in the woods there is a grove of pine and cypresses known as Gargaphe, a hidden place most sacred to the celibate Diana. And deep in its recesses is a grotto artlessly fabricated by the genius of nature, which, in imitating art, has shaped a natural organic arch out of a living pumice of light tufa. So he enters into, as he's out hunting, he enters into this little grotto, this little enchanted place, perhaps. Not necessarily enchanted, but enchanting. And that is where Diana, the goddess Diana, is bathing. She is there bathing naked in a spring, attended by her maidens, but she is naked. And when she looks up and sees Actaeon standing there, it's a little awkward. And so she exacts revenge. Now remember, this is following Jove and Europa outraging Juno for Jove cheating on her once again. And so here you have an example of a goddess taking out vengeance on a human for a kind of sexual indiscretion. A lot going on there. The Actaeon is turned into a stag. It's a fairly familiar little metamorphosis again. He feels the horns, his feet become hooves, and you get that very by now obvious and familiar contiguity of transformation. And he goes and he tries to cry out for help or something, and all he hears is an animal bray. He no longer has the power of speech. He is rendered impossible to identify himself. And pretty soon that becomes an issue because his dogs come up at him. His hunting dogs. He was out hunting. His dogs are roving around in a pack, and they are going to find him. And when they do, bad things happen, quite frankly. The dismemberment at that point, the mutilation, is really quite horrifying. Now Brownie and Buster, two of his dogs, leap onto his back while Mountain Climber dangles from one shoulder. They'd started late but figured out a shortcut across the hilltop. Now he held at bay until the pack can gather and begin to savage him. Torn by their teeth, he makes a sound no man would make, and no stag either. A cry that echoes through those well-known heights, and kneeling like a suppliant at prayer, he turns toward them, pleading with his eyes, as a man would with his hands. But his companions loudly encourage the ferocious pack, all unaware. They look around for him, call out to him as though he weren't there. "Actaeon! Pity he's not here with us!" And hearing his own name, he turns his head. He might wish to be elsewhere, but he's present. He might wish merely to be watching this, rather than feeling the frenzy of his dogs who press around him, thrusting pointed snouts into the savaged body of their master, convinced that he's a stag. And it is said he did not die until his countless wounds had satisfied Diana's awful wrath. Wow. That's vicious. That is brutal. He's sitting there mute. He cannot communicate to them, and he is being devoured by his own hunting dogs. And you really feel it. Again, Ovid brings that close-up mentality, that close-up focus on the individual acts of savagery, so that you sense each bite, each tear of flesh is made obvious and physicalized, as opposed to just, and then the dogs were upon him, which is a very objectified way of looking at things. Here, he's bringing you right down into it. And you have to associate this to a degree with the brutality, quite frankly, of Roman soldiers. And putting Actaeon starts off as one of the triumphant guys, one of the hunters, and then he becomes the victim. And it puts you through empathy. It puts you in that place to consider the place of the victims, the place of the slaughtered. And it creates a kind of empathy. It creates a kind of new perspective that is suggesting that, maybe the victors aren't always right. Maybe the Roman army isn't always right. Maybe there are other perspectives. Maybe if we could only understand what people are saying to us while we slaughter them, we would think twice about it. Because remember, the empire is always going off and fighting people who don't speak the same language. And they're not necessarily, or the soldiers are not necessarily taught to, make an effort. So here you get this sense of empathy, and the brutality of it is shocking. The brutality of it is empathizing. He dies in a kind of passion, in this great orgy of devouring that is similar to the thrill of the hunt. You get the sense. when he is naming his dogs, it's a kind of catalog of excitement, and you really get into it. It's like, yeah, this dog and that dog and all the names, and it's just great. But there is that other side of it. There is that brutal underbelly that you can't ignore. And this little story brings that out, and brings it out to show the true ugliness that can be unleashed by wrath. Juno's wrath, yes, very explicitly Diana's wrath, but the idea of vengeance that keeps perpetuating violence and escalating it. Juno will get her revenge. The gods always will. Everybody will, because no action is discrete. There is always, always, always a repercussion. Because once you do something, inevitably, things are going to change.